Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran, coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlights the country's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty at G20 in Brazil, also calls for addressing the challenges faced by the Global South countries. Prime Minister Modi holds talks with Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto and Prime Ministers Luis Montenegro of Portugal and Giorgia Meloni of Italy. Sri Lanka gets a new cabinet, strengthening President Disanayeke's mandate to give the country a fresh start. Disanayake to visit India soon, confirms his new foreign minister. And reports say that COP29 reaches a fragile consensus on climate finance. Countries also urged to take up the issue at G20 Summit in Rio. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is attending the G20 Leaders Summit in Brazil. The Prime Minister was welcomed by Brazil's President Lula de Silva at the venue, the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro. Prime Minister Narendra Modi also met US President Joe Biden at the summit. Earlier, Brazilian President Luis Inácio Lula de Silva opened the summit of the Group of 20 Major Economies on Monday with the launch of a global alliance to combat poverty and hunger, which he called the result of political decisions. Lula said the devastating effects of climate change are to be seen all around the world and urged leaders to have the courage to act. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The Prime Minister spoke about India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty. Sharing India's success story, the Prime Minister said the main reason for success is its approach, back to basics and march to the future. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the G20 session on social inclusion and the fight against hunger and poverty in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The Prime Minister spoke on a number of issues, including India's efforts to alleviate hunger and poverty, amplifying the concerns of the Global South, push for sustainable development goals. The Prime Minister said that the people-centric decisions taken at the G20 Summit in New Delhi have been taken forward during Brazil's presidency. The Prime Minister expressed satisfaction over prioritizing SDG goals. The Prime Minister said that India focused on inclusive development, women-led development, and youth power and gave wings to the hopes and aspirations of the Global South. The Prime Minister noted that it is clear that one Earth, one family, one future is as relevant at this summit as it was last year. The Prime Minister also shared India's experiences and success stories. He said that over the last 10 years, India lifted 250 million people out of poverty, while over 800 million people are being given food grains free of cost. 550 million people are benefiting from the world's biggest health insurance scheme. Now, 60 million senior citizens over the age of 70 will also be able to benefit from free health insurance. Maintaining a focus on women-led development and social inclusion, over 300 million women micro-entrepreneurs have been linked to banks and given access to credit. Under the world's largest crop insurance scheme, over 40 million farmers have received benefits worth $20 billion. Under the farmer scheme, assistance worth over $40 billion has been given to 110 million farmers. Institutional credit worth $300 billion is being given to farmers. India is not only ensuring food security but also focusing on nutrition. The Saksham Anganwadi and Nutrition 2.0 campaign, which is an integrated nutrition support program, focuses in particular on nutrition for pregnant women, newborn babies, children under the age of 6, and adolescent girls. Through the midday meal scheme, special attention is also being paid to the nutritional needs of school going children. The Prime Minister said that India is also contributing to global food security. India provided humanitarian assistance to Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe recently. The Prime Minister noted that the main reason for our success is our approach back to basics and march to the future. PM Modi remarked that we have focused not only on natural farming and organic farming, but also on new technologies. Besides, India also focused on sustainable agriculture, protection of the environment, nutrition, and food security by promoting Shri Ann or millets. India developed more than 2,000 climate resilient crop varieties and has started the Digital Agriculture Mission. India's digital public infrastructure enables social and financial inclusion. Besides, India created a new model for inclusive development that strengthens the weakest link with the aspirational districts and blocks project. The Prime Minister also said that India supports Brazil's initiative for a global alliance against hunger and poverty. This is an important step towards the implementation of the Deccan High Level Principles for Food Security adopted at the New Delhi Summit. The Prime Minister also highlighted the concerns of the Global South, saying that the countries of the Global South are most adversely impacted by the food, fuel, and fertilizer crises caused by global conflicts. He said that discussions can only be successful when we keep in mind the challenges and priorities of the Global South. And just as we amplify the voice of the Global South by granting permanent membership of G20 to the African Union during the New Delhi Summit, we will reform institutions of global governance. With input from Gautam Roy in Brazil, Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India. On the sidelines of the G20 summit, Prime Minister Modi held bilateral talks with Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto in Rio. The Prime Minister said on social media platform X that this year is special as we are marking 75 years of India-Indonesia diplomatic relations. The Prime Minister said talks focused on improving ties in commerce, security, healthcare, pharmaceuticals and more. Prime Minister Modi also held talks with his Portuguese counterpart Luís Montenegro. The Prime Minister said on social media platform X that he had a very good meeting with Prime Minister of Portugal Luís Montenegro. India cherishes the long-standing ties with Portugal. The Prime Minister said that talks focused on adding more vigor to the economic linkages. Sectors such as renewable energy and green hydrogen offer many opportunities for more collaboration. The leaders also spoke about strong defense relations, people-to-people linkages and other subjects. Prime Minister Modi held bilateral talks with Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on the sidelines of the G20 summit. The Prime Minister said that talks centered around deepening ties in defense, security, trade and technology. The leaders also spoke about how to boost cooperation in culture, education and other such areas. India-Italy friendship can greatly contribute to a better planet. Mr. Modi held talks also with Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Brazil. India's ties with Norway have strengthened in recent years, particularly in sectors such as oil and gas, renewable energy, shipping and technology sharing. The two nations, which established diplomatic relations in 1947, continue to collaborate on research, including in Arctic studies, with India serving as an observer state in the Arctic Council. Now, the world's leaders are in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 Leaders Summit, where discussions on climate, trade and global security are dominating the agenda. With high stakes, degrading climate and rising tensions, decisions taken here could shape the future of the world. Take a closer look at what's on agenda at the summit begun.
All eyes are now on Rio de Janeiro as the G20 Leaders Summit kicks off on Monday. Over the next 2 days, the leaders of the world's largest economies will meet to tackle critical issues from poverty alleviation and combating hunger to institutional reforms, aiming to shape the future of our planet. The G20 nations represent 85% of the global economy and are key contributors to multilateral development banks. Leaders will focus on themes like climate finance, trade, and international security. Decisions made here will have a ripple effect on billions of lives worldwide. Climate change remains a contentious topic at the summit. Diplomatic tensions flared over global warming, with sources indicating that G20 nations reached a fragile consensus on climate finance, a point that has eluded recent UN talks in Azerbaijan. As the COP29 summit in Baku works on mobilizing climate funding, G20 leaders in Rio hold the critical financial tools needed to address the crisis.
And I have come to Rio with a simple message. G20 leaders must lead. And G20 countries, by definition, have tremendous economic clout and they yield massive diplomatic leverage. They must use it to tackle key global problems.
On Saturday, UN climate chief called on G20 leaders to prioritize climate finance, urging them to increase grants for developing nations and advance reforms in multilateral development banks. Amidst these discussions, US policy under President elect Donald Trump casts uncertainty over trade and security. While outgoing US President Joe Biden has approved Ukraine's use of long range US missiles against Russia, President elect Trump pledges major policy shifts, including potential talks to address the Ukraine conflict and new tariffs, signaling a high stakes shift in global diplomacy. Concerns over a US China trade war are likely to fuel intense trade talks at the summit. As the G20 summit begins in Rio, leaders face mounting pressure to deliver solutions on climate, trade, and global security. Bureau Report, DD India.
All right, now take a look at what else is making news around the world. Croatian volunteer drivers participated in an underwater cleanup effort in Milna Bay on the island of Brac, with the aim to address the growing environmental toll of tourism that's led to growing amounts of underwater waste. The Adriatic Sea is facing mounting challenges with rising temperatures, an increase in invasive species, shifting currents, and growing amounts of underwater waste, compounding the problem. Farmers in France resumed their protest by blocking a motorway outside Paris against the prospect of a trade agreement between the European Union, the Latin American countries, and Mercosur. A push by the European Union and South America's Mercosur bloc to conclude long-running trade negotiations by the end of the year has rekindled anger in France. Greenpeace activists dumped tornado debris outside the headquarters of Total Energies near Paris. They want oil and gas industries to be taxed to benefit environmental activists from climate disaster funds. Spanish police have dismantled an international drug trafficking ring linked to Mexico's notorious Sinaloa cartel. Authorities have arrested 14 people, 11 men and 3 women, accused of involvement in the kidnapping and murder of a man in Catalonia. The investigation began on August the 5th when the decomposed body of a 46-year-old man showing signs of violence was discovered in a wooded area in Tarragona. Nigeria has launched its Mpox vaccination campaign, starting with health workers in the capital, Abuja. The rollout began over a month behind schedule following the arrival of 10,000 vaccine doses from the United States in August. This comes after the World Health Organization declared Mpox as a global public health emergency for the second time in 2 years. And still to come on DD India Live. US envoy expected in Beirut in a bid to advance ceasefire. And India is projected to be the fastest growing economy among G20 countries with a 7% GDP growth rate expected for 2024.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. I am Ramesh Ramachandran. India has made a strong intervention at the UN Climate Summit in Baku, urging decisive action on climate change. Highlighting urgent priorities, India called for barrier-free technology transfer, equitable climate finance, stronger international cooperation and mutual trust. DD India's Tapas Bhattacharya has more.
In a decisive intervention at the 2024 annual high-level ministerial roundtable on pre-2030 climate ambition, India has emphasized bold steps to combat climate change at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. Representing India, Leena Nandan, Secretary of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, highlighted alarming facts from the 2024 NDC synthesis report. She warned that 86% of the global carbon budget for 2020-2030 is on track to be used up, underscoring the urgency for decisive action. India outlined a 4-point agenda to drive global climate action. First, it stressed the need for barrier-free technology transfer, calling for the removal of intellectual property restrictions on green innovations. Access to affordable, adaptable, and locally relevant technologies is critical for developing nations. Second, climate finance remains central. Developed nations must fulfill overdue commitments, ensuring equitable and accessible funding to support clean energy and disaster-resilient infrastructure in the global south. Third, India called for enhanced international cooperation to ensure cost-effective and scalable mitigation efforts. It cautioned against unilateral trade measures that unfairly burden developing nations. Finally, India highlighted the importance of mutual trust. Developed nations must lead with meaningful action, fostering trust to achieve climate ambitions by 2030. Despite challenges, India remains optimistic. With 195 parties submitting NDCs, global emissions are projected to peak before 2030. However, the success of this ambition hinges on robust financial resources, technology transfer, and capacity building. India's call to action at COP29 is clear. Climate solutions must be just, equitable, and collaborative. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
Sri Lanka's newly appointed 21-member cabinet take oath on Monday before President Anura Kumara Dissanayake at the Presidential Secretariat in Colombo. Harini Amarasuriya and Vijitha Herath retain their portfolios as the country's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister respectively. Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister said that the President is expected to travel to India in mid-December, during which he will hold discussions with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
As Sri Lanka's newly appointed cabinet of ministers took oath on Monday at the Presidential Secretariat in Colombo, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake retained the key defence and finance portfolios after sweeping the snap parliamentary elections last week. The leftist leader Dissanayake confirmed the interim cabinet ministers along with Prime Minister Harini Amarasuriya and Foreign Minister Vijit Herath, who all retained their respective portfolios. In addition, Harini Amarasuriya will also be the Minister of Education, Higher Education and Vocational Studies. Other key appointments include Bimal Rathanayake, who has been assigned the portfolio of Transport, Highways and Civil Aviation, while Dr. Nalinda Jayatissa has been given the charge of Health and Media. The new government will hold its first parliamentary sitting on Thursday to elect the Speaker of the House. Dissanayake is expected to present his key policy priorities to the newly appointed lawmakers.
The most important thing, this power comes with accountability. On one side, it is accountability to the people. On the other hand, it is being responsible to our movement. Therefore, whatever power that was given to us, whether in the constitution or by law, when we use this power, we must be responsible to the people and the movement.
Meanwhile, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has congratulated his Sri Lankan counterpart Vijitha Herath on his reappointment. With Ahmed Muin Faruqi, Ayushi Bhatnagar for DD India.
The US decision to authorize long-range Ukrainian strikes could help Kyiv defend the foothold in Russia's Kursk region so that it may have leverage in any war talks. But analysts feel this little is too late to change the course of the war. The Kremlin called the US decision reckless. Russia has been warning the West that such an escalation would raise the risk of a confrontation with NATO. This report gives us the view from Europe.
As the Russia-Ukraine conflict nears its 1,000th day, both sides continue to engage in fierce military operations, while global diplomatic efforts intensify to address the escalating crisis. The prolonged war has become an increasingly complex and multifaceted battle with no end in sight. As military engagements continue, support for either sides is building up. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has expressed hope that EU members could soon agree to allow Ukraine to use arms to strike inside Russia.
I've been saying once and again that Ukraine should be able to use the arm we provided to them in order to not only to stop the arrow, but also to be able to hit the Arkas. I continue believing this is what has to be done. I'm sure it will be discussed once again. I hope member states will agree on that, and if not, anyone will do whatever they believe is according with the need to support Ukraine.
Amidst shifting dynamics, German Foreign Minister has emphasized that there is no change in Western strategy.
That is why we are providing even more and more intensive support in the defense of peace in Ukraine, above all in air defense. And that is why the decision from the American side, which I would like to emphasize, is not a rethinking, but an intensification of what has already been provided by other partners. It is so important at this moment.
Meanwhile, in response to the US President Joe Biden's move to allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with long-range American missiles, Russian lawmaker Maria Butina denounced the decision and warned that it could lead to a third world war. Amidst the ongoing military action, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Yevgeny Balitsky, the Russian-installed governor of the Moscow-controlled Zaporizhia region in Ukraine. The meeting took place at the Kremlin just hours after the US announcement regarding the missile strikes.
If such a decision has been made and conveyed to the Kiev regime, then this means a qualitatively new round of the escalation of tension. This is also a qualitatively new situation from the standpoint of US involvement in this conflict.
The US move came soon after the Russian airstrikes on Sumy, a Ukrainian city close to the Russian border, where at least 11 people, including 2 children, were killed and 89 injured on Sunday. Another Russian missile attack on Monday killed 10 people and wounded 44 in Ukraine's Black Sea port of Odessa. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
A senior Lebanese official confirmed on Monday that a US envoy is set to visit Lebanon on Tuesday for discussions on a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The visit, led by White House envoy Amos Hochstein, is expected to build on a US ceasefire proposal submitted to Lebanon last week. However, the visit has not yet been officially confirmed by Washington, D.C. As far as Beirut is concerned, it is reportedly supportive of Washington, D.C.'s efforts to bring an end to the conflict, but the Lebanese government is seeking revisions to a proposal on how to monitor a potential truce. Finland is hosting its first large-scale NATO artillery exercise since the Nordic nation joined the military alliance last year. On the second day of NATO artillery exercise, Finnish and British troops practiced live fire drills using K9 tanks and Archer cannons. This exercise marks the first time NATO allies are practicing artillery fire at a large scale on Finnish soil. The director of military exercise said that the aim of this exercise is to train and develop interoperability within the alliance.
The aim of this exercise is to train and develop interoperability within the alliance concerning artillery units, how to direct fire, how to shoot.
Right, let's get you some latest visuals, this time again from the G20 Summit between the leaders of India and France. These are the visuals coming to you from Rio de Janeiro of a bilateral meeting between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron. The meeting took place on the margins of the 19th G20 Summit currently on in Rio de Janeiro. Right, if you're just tuning in, we are getting you the latest visuals of a bilateral meeting between the leaders of India and France on the margins of the ongoing G20 Summit in Brazil. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of DD India Live. You can get all the latest news and updates on the DD India mobile app. It's available on Android and iOS platforms. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X and Instagram. You can also check out our website ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. From all of us here in New Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Live.